When discussing with netizens, I have always emphasized that the US remains the world's foremost superpower, with its comprehensive national strength clearly surpassing China's. However, if the US and China were to engage in a direct, all-out conflict, a one-on-one showdown, the US would have no chance of winning. This is because the US has become a global parasite, its strength relying on the dollar system's infiltration of global economic activities and its long-standing control and coercion of allies. If the US continues its hypocrisy and unites with allies to confront China, China will face significant pressure. Yet, this also means the US cannot treat its allies as portable blood banks, drawing resources at will. In a high-intensity confrontation with China, the US is likely to collapse suddenly. Regarding the widely discussed US debt issue, since I started making videos last year, US debt has been a constant topic, climbing past $34 trillion, then $36 trillion, and recently surpassing $38 trillion, with the rate of increase accelerating. Meanwhile, to avoid hitting the debt ceiling too soon, the US government has fallen into a shutdown. American farmers, struggling because China is not buying soybeans, urgently need subsidies to repay loans and purchase seeds, fertilizers, machinery, and other production essentials for the next season. With the government shut down, even if private institutions are willing to help, farmers are unlikely to receive funds this year. Under these circumstances, Trump remains arrogantly convinced he can wage a trade war with China, frequently threatening 100% tariffs, failing to grasp that this meaningless numbers game is something China simply does not care about. As an old Chinese saying goes, when a nation is on the verge of collapse, monsters will emerge. Today's Trump is the monster performing on the political stage during the twilight of the American empire. His team of monsters cannot address the three major issues plaguing American society. First, the US needs to re-establish a strong centralized government like that of the Roosevelt era, immediately leading with significant investments in infrastructure, particularly upgrading the power grid and transportation networks, to meet the basic demands of industrialization and maintain conditions for competing with China in AI. Whether Trump personally leads his redneck MAGA supporters to work on production lines tightening screws or relies on robots to replace human labor, electricity, transportation, and communication infrastructure require massive investments. If the government does not take on this risk, companies investing in US factories cannot escape high-cost pressures, and the US cannot re-industrialize. However, with US debt so high, the government must sustain massive military spending while also increasing investments in anti-immigration measures and drug enforcement, leaving no funds available. Trump attempts to raise federal revenue through tariffs, but tariffs essentially force ordinary Americans, particularly low and middle-income groups, to bear the tax burden that should fall on large corporations and the wealthy. Yet, the rich and big businesses will not invest in US factories just because they have more funds. They will always seek alternatives to China within legal frameworks, buying from Southeast Asia or Mexico instead. Investing in US factories is simply not cost-effective. As living costs rise, ordinary Americans will cut consumption, while also pressuring the Trump administration for subsidies. This creates a vicious cycle that is nearly impossible to resolve. Only a charismatic and capable leader like Roosevelt could tackle such a crisis. But Trump is busy enriching his family and donors, lacking both the ability and the will to address this issue. With just over 3 years left in his term and no possibility of re-election, even if Trump starts pushing infrastructure projects now, he will not see results before his term ends. Rather than risk fiscal bankruptcy for infrastructure, he prefers to pass the ticking time bomb to the next president and focus on personal enrichment. Second, as mentioned earlier, Trump, his donors, and the Wall Street speculators and Silicon Valley elites they represent have captured the lion's share of societal progress, holding most of the nation's wealth. Their interests are completely misaligned with those of ordinary Americans, even in opposition. For example, many of the clothes and hats sold at Trump Tower are imported from China. It is no surprise that Trump and his MAGA supporters procure items bearing anti-China slogans from China itself. For these capitalists, MAGA is just a slogan. When faced with business decisions, they follow profit-driven principles. Trump demands that companies like Apple set up production lines in the U.S. and forces TSMC to relocate there. But his family businesses will never invest in American manufacturing or build factories to create jobs for rednecks, as it does not align with commercial interests. What are Trump and his donors busy with? Larry Ellison's Oracle, a typical software giant, earns enormous profits through value-added software services. In the TikTok controversy, Oracle not only secured TikTok's cloud data business, but also, through Ellison's consortium, gained operational rights for TikTok's U.S. operations. If software and investments can yield huge profits, why would he invest in factories? Another major Trump donor, Elon Musk, runs Tesla, whose most critical overseas factory is in Shanghai, China. It was the Shanghai factory that saved Musk during his crisis, making him the world's richest man today. Even his U.S. factories rely heavily on Chinese components. After all, Musk is accountable to Tesla's board, not MAGA supporters. Musk himself is a major speculator in Dogecoin, reaping substantial profits. Trump's son, Barron, not yet 20, has ventured into the cryptocurrency market, amassing wealth under the endorsement of Binance founder CZ, leveraging his father's presidential status. Noticed by Forbes, he has been dubbed a cryptocurrency genius. If Trump's family can make fortunes through issuing coins and insider stock trading, why would they consider opening factories in the U.S.? In fact, Trump's plan to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. has been a political scam from the start. He and his inner circle primarily profit through financial speculation, internet concept hype, and cryptocurrency schemes. The U.S. stock market's false prosperity is built on a massive bubble, and they will not pop it themselves. Instead, they join the chorus, inflating it further. When this bubble bursts, it will mark the collapse of U.S. hegemony. But that is irrelevant to them, as they already possess inexhaustible wealth. Third, American education faces significant problems. Beyond the abysmal performance in subjects like math, physics, chemistry, and geography, even the simplest, most straightforward topics cannot be discussed in the U.S. As a gamer, I enjoy female protagonists in games who are beautiful, fair-skinned, and attractive, reflecting a basic market demand. In the U.S., however, this violates DEI principles. Out of nowhere, predatory companies have emerged, profiting by suing game companies for alleged DEI violations, forming a powerful interest group that has caused catastrophic cognitive biases in American society. I personally have no issue with LGBT communities. In Chengdu, China, there are many gay people, and in Guangzhou, many black individuals live well without facing discrimination. China knows Apple CEO Tim Cook is gay, yet people still love Apple products without prejudice. Chinese people admire black stars like Kobe, LeBron, and Curry. But in Chinese games, you will never see an unattractive protagonist of color or non-binary characters, as this reflects market realities. In the US, however, game companies risk extortion for following such market demands. This is a key reason for the rapid decline in quality of American games and Hollywood films. Simply put, audiences do not want niche content and will not pay for niche aesthetics. I mention DEI for another critical reason. The Democratic Party has long funded global NGOs to promote DEI, embedding U.S. ideological biases. This has earned Democrats strong support from immigrant and LGBT communities, giving them an electoral edge. This, in turn, fuels fear among rednecks, who, in panic, turn to white supremacist Trump. This deepens societal divides, with both sides demonizing each other, becoming politically irreconcilable. To secure votes, both parties deviate from basic facts and neutral rhetoric, embracing extremes. As a result, Americans, long exposed to extremist thinking, suffer from widespread cognitive deficiencies. For example, Trump repeatedly claims tariffs are paid by China. Anyone with basic reasoning can ask an importer and learn that tariffs are paid by U.S. importers. This simple question, easily answered with a Google search, is something American rednecks choose to believe in Trump's blatant lies without bothering to verify. To be blunt, as partisan fighting intensifies, social divisions worsen, and basic education quality declines, ordinary Americans are indeed becoming increasingly foolish. If your social circle includes both East Asian immigrants and native white Americans, you can often sense this starkly. Of course, the U.S. has many problems, too numerous to fully explain. China is far from perfect, with many perplexing flaws. However, China can maintain stability, and as long as it does not collapse, we need do almost nothing to witness the day when U.S. hegemony crumbles.